Welcome back to my trip around the contiguous US. After failing last year, I set out again to retry my Madman's mission. This is The Big Loop 2. Where we left off, I had crossed the plains and was now on a train heading into Chicago and having an existential crisis. My Chicago plans had somewhat expectedly changed last minute, so it meant I'd be experiencing Chicago by myself. It didn't actually change my plans that much since I was just gonna wing it anyway. However, at this point, I was starting to feel as though I had bitten off more than I could chew, as the reality of the trip started to set in, that I'd be doing almost everything by myself in unfamiliar locations for the next month and then some. Now you might think, why not try and meet some new people along the way? However, I am perhaps the most socially anxious person to ever make a travel video. Also, layer on the usual existential angst I feel, and the fact that there's thick wildfire haze in early June, and you've got a deep dish of dread. That's rough, but I'm keeping it in. To start this day, I decided to head on over to the Shed Aquarium because I like looking at fish. Also that shed with 2 Ds, not an aquarium in some guy's shed. Enough worrying about the future or whatever, let's look at some fish.
Let's go gambling!
You know what that means? Fish, 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 fish.
Larry.
This central room had a pretty crazy layout. I don't know where to start with the Shed Aquarium. It's got fish, turtles, spiders, whatever kind of fish this is. Do you know how weird a fish has to be for me to not have heard of it? Unsurprisingly, I was that kid who just read animal books on the bus, and I think I've retained a decent chunk of it. Also pretty exciting depending on who you are, they have the 3rd category of amphibian, the Sicilian. It looks like a giant worm, it lives underground, and it's an amphibian. That's pretty cool to see since I've never seen one of those in person before. In fact, the tropics exhibit as a whole might have been my favorite since there's so many strange and giant fish in it. It's pretty standard for zoos and aquariums and the like to have a local exhibit. However, the Great Lakes, in my opinion, doesn't contain a lot of the most interesting fish in the world. Although, it does have something I know a lot of you have been waiting for. I saw a bunch of comments on the last part, really begging for the invasive lamprey pile, and here it is. However, this section actually contains the best fish of all. I love sturgeon. This aquarium also has a sturgeon touch tank, which is a thing I've seen at the past 3 aquariums I've been to. I had never seen one before a few years ago, and now they're everywhere? Where was that when I was a kid? There's also a separate ray touch tank, and they had names like Splash, because one of them would splash people. There was a coral reef exhibit talking about coral, go figure, which are a crazy creature when you really think about them. All coral is made up of a bunch of little polyps that all cling together to make the structures we know and have varying opinions on. If I was a coral, it'd take 360 years for me to grow, by the way. This is also the area with the shark tank. I tried pitching them to invest in the Big Loop 2, but they weren't biting. After that, I decided to walk in a direction. I had no plan. I thought about going up Sears Tower, but it was pretty hazy out and figured that'd be kind of a waste. So I walked along the lake. Just keep going north. Chicago's nickname is, of course, the Windy City, and, yep. I said in the last part that a lot of large American cities seemed more exciting than they were, but Chicago feels like how I imagined a city would feel as a kid growing up in a smallish town. Like there's actually people around doing things. Saw this fountain, can't remember the name. I'm sure it's probably important, maybe. I was having such a good time in Chicago, can't you tell? I also saw the famous Chicago Eye sculpture that everyone has definitely heard of. Mood aside, I do think Chicago is a cool city, at least what I saw of it, and would love to return at some point. I kept walking and eventually ended up at Navy Pier and thought, hey, I've heard of that place, I guess I'll check it out. Not my best move, especially since there really isn't anything to do by yourself there. Nothing makes me feel more alone than large crowds of people. Also, just didn't feel like my vibe in general, but I walked to the end and back since I didn't know what else to do. I walked along the river. Fun fact, the Chicago River actually flows backwards. What does that mean? Well, it actually used to flow into Lake Michigan, and then they said, hold on, what if it flowed out? And then they did that. I had one more obligatory Chicago landmark I wanted to check off. The Beeb. Its official name is Cloud Gate, but that feels like calling someone who goes by a nickname their full legal name. I do think it's really funny that one of Chicago's most iconic landmarks is a big silver bean. I mean, it's neat, but it is a bean. And also, I think the guy who created it fucking hates that people call it the Bean. Millennium Park, which is where the Bean is located, was hosting the Chicago Blues Festival, so I decided to sit down for a minute in the grass. The song that was being played was talking about leaving your troubles at the door. Unfortunately, parks don't have doors. Then I saw this fountain and thought, maybe this is it for me today. My plan of walking for the sake of walking had worked. By the end of the day, my leg hurt too much to feel lonely, which is vaguely the plot of House, probably. I don't want that to be the last sentence of the day, so what I learned about Chicago is that there's a lot more Bible study courses being offered than I would have thought.
Alright, well, it's day 6. What I learned yesterday is, I just gotta take things one day at a time. We're back. Just gotta keep moving forward. We're going to Indiana and Ohio today. Just gotta keep moving forward.
Now as I leave Chicago, I get to experience the beautiful scenery of strip malls.
Once we see the fireworks store, that's when I know I'm in Indiana. State number 7.
I was in Indiana. Can you believe it? Indiana. I almost immediately saw a giant plume of smoke. Now, believe it or not, I was about to visit my first national park of the trip, Indiana Dunes. Upgraded from a national seashore, it does certainly exist. There's actually quite a few access points to the park, but I started out with West Beach, where I got started seeing some wetlands, and as I pulled up to the parking lot, the dunes. I started out with a little climb up the stairs to overlook the dunes, and it was a nice break after spending a lot of time in cities the past couple of days. But when I got to the beach, maybe it's because it was gray and cloudy, but it felt kind of lacking.
If you look in the distance that way, you can see a beautiful oil refinery. But if we turn around, you can see another refinery. What a beautiful national park.
It's places like this that really make it clear we fucked up this land. There's a dissonance created by seeing these massive structures in the distance, like the whole shore used to be like this, Now it's a national park with the most fucked up looking boundaries. I'm pretty sure you can see downtown Chicago on a clear day, but alas. I also found a ladybug. Then I went to another part of the park called Mount Baldy, and I thought I was about to see a massive sand dune, which, to be fair, I did. Also, a giant cooling tower. When it comes to ranking national parks, it feels silly to categorize nature based on subjective characteristics. All that prelude to say this is my least favorite of the ones I've been to. I know it's an important place to conserve the shore, but I think it should have stayed a national seashore. Now let me just see how long it's going to take to get to my hotel. Oh my god, $25 in tolls? I know I'm doing a massive road trip and I'd hopefully have $25 to spare, but damn. Guess I'll take the scenic route. Now I could begin the thrilling portion of driving through Indiana. I shouldn't have slandered the dunes too much when the rest of my day would be spent mostly looking at this pumpkin. I hope you all enjoy the scenery of the flat. I mean, this is exactly what I expected driving through Indiana, and maybe it caused my mental state to start to deteriorate a bit. I don't know, is it normal to pretend as though you're talking to someone else even when nobody's there?
I realize I'm not a big fan of the state highway signs. They're just kind of white squares, it looks a little too much like a speed limit sign. We have the first 2 seasons of Bob's Burgers are really good. As we cross into Eastern time, I thought Ohio was the Eastern time border. That billboard just says hit by a truck. No, it's Indiana. I just noticed that. I've been here for it does also make it sound like I just noticed. I think I got sand in my area, which doesn't even make sense.
Oh, any lyrics beyond the chorus. This was routine though. Farm town, until...
It's Ohio time. First new state of the trip for me. Haven't been to Ohio yet. It's the first state that didn't happen last year, so it's weird to say that I've made more progress than last year because I'm in Ohio. I wouldn't say I'm excited to be in Ohio, but it's hey, it's a new state. There was immediately road construction as soon as I crossed the border, except, nothing's actually happening, it's just cones. So.
Ohio is a state that exists. I'm saying that a lot today. If it was a Pokemon, it would be normal type. I wish I had more to say on it, but yeah, Ohio is just truly kinda there. Why everyone picks on Ohio over Indiana, I have no idea. They feel very similar to me.
Since I decided to take the southern toll-free route, I decided to take a little detour to see something. Now, I know last year when I did that, I ended up going to a town called Climax, but it's not like I have anyone to bring to Climax this year, so, you know, what would even be the point? Oh, I drove myself to Climax? That's not special, you know?
So what was I gonna see? Well, I'm gonna drag it out a bit more.
It's a cool church, in whatever town we're in.
My stop was in Gilboa, where I would see the big beef cow. What a truly magnificent bovine. I'm sure at least one person is wondering why I went out of my way to see a giant cow statue, and to you, dear viewer, named Marcus, I say, you just wouldn't get it.
There it is.
Okay, more Ohio, yippee!
Down in Ohio, swag like Ohio. Down in Ohio, swag like Ohio.
Here's a mundane fact. I think Bucyrus was the first repeat name of any place I passed through since there was one in North Dakota. The only songs I could think of relating to Ohio were Swag Like Ohio and Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Okay, we're here. Day 7 started out with pouring rain, which was a nice break from the non-stop sun. I started out by visiting the second national park of the trip, Cuyahoga Valley. For the pronunciation, I saw it could be pronounced Cuyahoga or Cuyahoga, or I'm completely mispronouncing it. Whatever case, please make sure to be super mad about it in the comments. I'd really appreciate that. Usually I like to start out national parks with the visitor center. What a nice fun fact in the visitor center, but it took the 13th fire to realize you need to clean the river up? There's a joke here, but I don't want to sound too down bad. Pretty good visitor center, also a cool little town around it that was probably just like employee housing and restored buildings. Then I went to hike on some trails, through the meadows, into the forest, and saw some ledges. Get a little bit of view of the whole park, probably not even the whole park. It's kind of an oblong park. Also, to my recollection, this is the first time I ever saw a cardinal with my own 2 eyes, not just through a screen. I feel like some people are going to be flabbergasted by that, but cardinals just don't live out west. I kind of thought this park would be mostly just some forest, which would have been nice, not too much of a standout though. However, I would say these rock formations make it feel like a worthy stop. I am a big fan of rocks. I feel like if my life took a different path, I would be a geologist. Maybe I still could be. There's more life to live. I often worry about coming off as insincere when I'm trying to be genuine, but this was like a genuinely cool area that exceeded my expectations. For the first time in a bit, my mood was starting to improve, and all it took was getting back to nature, as well as an ominous rusted door blocking off a cave entrance. There's also this chicken wandering around? Why are they here? Alright, now I'm saying words to use any last remaining video clips I thought were cool before driving up the valley. There's a few ski areas around here. I don't need to say anything. I spotted a snapping turtle on the side of the road while driving past and stopped to get a closer look. If you're from a snapping turtle area, I'm sure this isn't that interesting, but it's another animal I had never seen in the wild before, and I thought it was cool. Keep driving up the road to a different visitor center, the Canal Exploration Center. Yep, there's a canal. Consider it explored. Now, I like collecting the national park maps. I've noticed more often that parks aren't putting them out, but you gotta ask for them. Unfortunately, I'm bad at transitioning my thoughts from my brain to my mouth, and forget every adjective I could have used to describe this map. And do you have the map that looks like this? The park employee knew what I was talking about though, so hell yeah, another map for the collection. Then one last stop in the park, Bridal Veil Falls. I feel like there's gotta be a Bridal Veil Falls in every state. It's like the Springfield of waterfall names.
I honestly enjoyed Cuyahoga a lot more than I thought I would, considering it's like the Ohio National Park. Honestly, like maybe a top 15 national park of the ones I've been to. What do you mean, how many have I been to? I don't see how that's relevant. I think like 16.
Now, I was definitely pleasantly surprised by Cuyahoga Valley, but then immediately after leaving, it's like, oh yeah, I'm in Cleveland. I got nothing left to say about Ohio, so...
Alright, let's go. State number 9 of the trip. New state number 2 for me, Pennsylvania. We won't be stopping, but we'll be back. Don't you worry, pencil heads. Maybe we'll stop in the rest area. I don't know.
I stopped at the rest area. I'm just in this little nub, so I'm gonna keep going.
Alright, let's go. State number 10.
In every state, I try to spend at least some time not on the interstate. I mean, I'll be spending a lot of time not on the interstate layer, but whatever. I just wanted to find a place to stop on Lake Erie so I can say I've seen all the Great Lakes. Here's the ranking. This basically translates to how much time I spent at each. Now it's time for one of my biggest regrets of the trip. I thought it would be a fun bit to see Niagara Falls for a second. Here's the thing, you can't just make a quick stop at Niagara Falls. It might be the biggest tourist trap I've been to. The city of Niagara Falls feels like a maze. Also, there are so many people here. It's amazing I got a couple of shots with like nobody in them. The falls are really cool though, but the namesake cities on either side, less so. Moral of the story, don't blast through the falls. If you're gonna go see them, you might as well set aside some time for them. I thought it'd be fun to include in the video, but I might have been the most stressful thing I had done in the trip up to that point.
I have committed numerous traffic violations in the city of Niagara Falls, New York.
Also funny that just down the road was this nice little park where there was nobody. Now it's time for a montage of driving on the interstate as the sun sets. This might have been the latest I was driving in a day because I was not expecting to stay in Cuyahoga Valley until 2. Who'd have thunk that I would have willingly extended the time I spent in Ohio?
Day 8, which means, starting the second week of the trip, which, that's crazy that it's already here, but I don't know, and I'm already wondering, like, why am I doing this? I'm really starting to slow down. I'm losing energy. Feel selfish for going through with this. I guess I'll go explore the Adirondacks. Let's go.
I was clearly feeling pretty low at this point, and this is where the conflicting feelings of I am so privileged to be able to do this, and why have I been saving years to do this? Why am I doing this at all? Really started to clash. I was starting in Watertown and heading through the Adirondacks that day. Now, thankfully a bit later the clouds started to part, and I think it improved my mood somewhat. Also, I swear the bug splatters concentrate right where the camera was pointed. The rest of the windshield was usually fine, but there'll just be like one intrusive one just like right in view.
I don't know if it's good or bad that I can stop a panic attack from happening by driving. Driving's like, hey, I gotta drive. I gotta focus on this task, and if I don't, then I'll die. So, you can wait. I assume this would be considered rural New York, but it just feels so, like, not rural to me. Like, look how many buildings there are. There's so many driveways. I kind of miss the middle of nowhere. Like, for some people, the middle of nowhere gives them extreme anxiety. But for me, it's the opposite. Where, like, especially when driving through a city is like, I hate it so much. I hope there's some roads today that are just like, yeah, there's none around.
I've seen people say that the East Coast is just as empty between big cities as the West, and it's like, no. The West is on a whole different level of emptiness. Like, the only place that really comes close in the East is maybe North Maine. I mentioned it before, but I do kind of like passing through small towns and seeing if I spot anything interesting. I also just kind of appreciate the different architecture. It's a nice break from the major highways because it's a bit soul-crushing when every interstate off-ramp feels pretty much the same. Of course, it's common knowledge that chain restaurants and big box stores are all across the country, but driving for thousands of miles and seeing the same establishments, you just kind of go like, damn. As I continued to drive, it got more rural, but I'm still seeing signs and mailboxes. I want more rural. More. I think I need to get out of the car.
Back to having a little bit of a crisis, just had a moment where I'm like, oh, I'm in the middle of the Adirondacks, driving. I drove all the way here. I'm thousands of miles from home. I'm alone. And that's my life. Nice scenery, though.
Then for the first time in a week, I could see some proper mountains in the distance. I stopped at Tupper Lake, and I wasn't sure if I should expect these chairs to be everywhere, but they were. These chairs are known as Adirondacks, and they are some of the dumbest chairs in the world. I'm sure I'm parroting something I've heard before, but who wants to sit with their knees above their hips, low to the ground, but also the armrests are high up and it's all made of wood? I feel like I should have recorded myself sitting in one, but it proves my point that I didn't, because who would want to? Look at these goslings to cleanse. I feel like I was entering the most touristy part of the Adirondacks here with the type of buildings I was seeing. Passed by another lake, and then the most famous town of the Adirondacks, Lake Placid, which hosted the Winter Olympics twice. I didn't really want to stop there. It felt like a kind of a tourist trap, but more like an upscale one, if that makes sense. But still meant to trap, you know? The Adirondacks were the first region that I feel like I missed out on because I was just so burnt out when I passed through them. They looked really cool, and I'm sure I would have enjoyed them more had I gone off on some side roads and may hike some trails, but as will continue to be demonstrated, I am bad at planning. At this point, my destination for the night was 20 miles as the crow flies, but Lake Champlain is quite oblong with limited options across. Now, I might not have stopped in Lake Placid, but I did stop in Plattsburgh. They've got an obelisk. This day was another day where it hit me like a train what I was doing. Unlike the Chicago day though, where I was just in one city, this was a day where I had to keep moving down the road. I was really questioning my life decisions. But I persevered. The whole day was kind of a blur, and I don't feel like I appreciated it as much as I could have. This place is also one of the few, and maybe only, places to include French on official road signs in the US. Since I was so close to Quebec, and there are quite a few French speakers in that part of the US as well.
Cross this bridge, I think at the apex here, right? Yeah. We're in Vermont. Let's go. State number 11 of the trip. Another new state for me. Never been to Vermont before. New York. Probably my least favorite state to drive in so far. Just the layout of things. I'm sure that's not going to stop, though.
I saw a Confederate flag like 5 minutes into Vermont. Vermont is the Green Mountain state, but you would not be able to tell it from this part. Here I was doing a little island hopping and bridge filming. Calling it island hopping is weird since I was driving. Whatever, you get the idea. I got to Burlington pretty late because I'm bad at planning. It was the first and only place I got honked at on this trip, which is kind of surprising. Unrelated, semi-related, I hated driving through Burlington. The streets were so narrow, but at least I was driving a Subaru, so I blended in minus the plate. I was staying at a campsite on the edge of town and took a little stroll before it got too dark out, where I learned my campsite was next to a cemetery. Which doesn't bother me because the only ghosts are within our minds. When I woke up on day 9, I saw a spider larger than any I've seen in Montana inside my tent. Alright, time to get out of here. Fun fact about Burlington is that it's the least populous, most populated city in the state. Now I can claim this video as educational. I was still feeling pretty rough since I was now getting tired of the constant rain and overcast, and the loneliness was really hitting me at this point, and I was thinking about things that are probably a little too personal for this video. At least the scenery was nice though, really enjoying the Green Mountain State and actually seeing the Green Mountains. I wanted to visit some Capitol buildings on this trip, but hadn't so far. However, I'd be passing through Montpelier, which is the least populated state capital. So there's another fun fact for free. The Vermont Capitol building is pretty neat, got a nice gold dome. I didn't go in, I got places to be. Saw another cow statue though. Moo.
Alright, day 9, what's the vibe? I don't like driving in New England. I know I've only been to Vermont so far, but I have a feeling that's going to continue for the rest. I mean, like, you know, the rural driving is actually fine, you know, it's very nice scenery, quite lovely out here. The cities, though, are very cramped. These cities were built before cars existed, but now we're going to force cars into them. It's like, cool.
The whole thing does make me wish the US had reliable public transit all over so I could do the whole trip that way, but alas. I know I'm not driving on an interstate at this point in the video, but one more final fun fact about Vermont is that they label their exits weird. So almost every exit in the US's number is based on the closest mile marker, but Vermont has them sequentially, so exit 10 could be on mile 50, for example. I do prefer the regular mile marker way, since if you know your exit, you have an approximate idea of how far away it's going to be, but the main thing is, Vermont, get with the program. What are we doing here?
As we cross this river, we're going into New Hampshire. Yep. Live free or die. Oh, look at that. There's nothing. There's nothing going on here.
Yeah, the scenery seems similar, so I'll skip to the main event of the day. Mount Washington, the highest peak in the Northeast, also holds the title of greatest prominence east of the Mississippi River, and you can't see it right now because of the clouds. Don't worry, there's a road up so you'll get a better view. At the start of the road, there's a gate where you pay and they give you this bumper sticker, and I'm thinking, I've been on far worse roads than whatever will be up here. That isn't some clever setup for the road being super difficult or something going wrong. I genuinely have been on several random Forest Service roads where it felt like because I was able to drive away, my car had survived. Like, this road is paved, come on. Me getting into an imaginary pissing contest about road quality aside, this was a neat drive. You start on this forest section, but as you climb higher, you can see the environment start to change.
Oh, yes, dude.
Once you're able to see beyond the trees is when the drive starts to get really good. After driving across the plains, Midwest, and Great Lakes, this felt like a real treat. Sure, the Adirondacks in Vermont had some twists and turns, but this had some real elevation. I was being a bit too harsh earlier because this road definitely isn't the easiest to drive on. You do need to be paying a lot of attention, but at the same time it felt pretty smooth to drive on, and I don't have to worry about mud or giant rocks in the middle of the road that could just destroy the underside of my car. I kind of love the feeling when the road just plummets off the side. I think that's the most of an adrenaline junkie I'll ever be, though. Then I'll admit it gets a little sketchy in the fog. That was probably the most nerve-wracking part of this drive because if someone doesn't want to drive on their side of the road, Thankfully it didn't happen. I made it to the summit parking lot with no issues and encountered Mount Washington's greatest claim to fame. Mount Washington is one of the windiest places on Earth and has the highest non-tornado/cyclone wind speed ever recorded at 231 miles per hour. That was in the winter, but to my understanding, the wind never winds down. The summit is just a quick walk up from the parking lot, and it's pretty cool to be there, but at the same time, it's cold and windy, and you can't see anything. It's all just gray, so let's go inside. Inside there's a museum mostly talking about the weather station. You can see the equipment used to measure the record-breaking speed in 1934. There's some other stuff talking about the environment. Also, there's a railroad up, but that's an adventure for another time. I'd love to come back in the fall. As I already said, not too much to see at the summit, so let's head back down, and if you thought the drive up was cool, the drive down is even better. The angle at which you view the landscape is much better, and the valley looks like a river of clouds. This was one of the coolest moments of the trip, hands down.
Alright, New England cities, pain to drive through, but this might redeem it. This might be my favorite part of the trip so far. I like it because it reminds me of...
Now, drive down felt a lot steeper than to drive up, and you really notice since your car will just start going down, which I think is really fun. Driving down a winding mountain road, letting gravity do most of the work, might be one of my top 10 favorite things to do. And I'll say it again, the scenery is amazing. It's a different vibe than what I'm used to since the tree line is much higher up on the mountains and I'm used to Rocky Mountains. Words don't do it justice. You can see, but also the phone camera doesn't do it justice. Also, there were several reminders to pause and take a break for the brakes since they could start to overheat, and I think I smelled them at some point. I hope I didn't, and I was just making things up, but you definitely wanted to use brakes. As much as I wanted to just let it ride, that would have ended badly. But I'm not going to complain about spending more time here. At one point, I could see the summit and was tempted to drive back up to see if I could get an unobstructed view from up there, but I knew the mist would return as soon as I got near the top, so I didn't even bother. Pretty much every time I stopped, I got more pictures, and here's some more words to fill the script because Mount Washington was super cool and I want to include a lot of it in this video, and wow, it's so cool! Feel free to fill out the survey while Mount Washington footage plays in the background. Question 1. What place that's been featured so far in the Big Loop 2 would you most want to visit? Question 2. What vehicle would you most want to take a big road trip in if money wasn't an issue and it didn't need repairs? Question 3. Could you endure driving 8 hours every day with barely any social contact? Question 4. Do you think you've peaked in life and are on a downward slope, much like the one seen in the video? Question 5. What's your favorite fish? Thanks for filling out the survey. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. Now onwards to Maine. I took a wrong turn. Now onwards to Maine.
Surprise, it's Maine. It's Maine. Oh no. Impromptu filming because I did not realize the Maine border was already here.
I blasted through Maine since I spent a lot of time at Mount Washington. Here's the thing, Maine is mostly forest, so this was just kind of what the whole drive looked like. I guess there was construction in Augusta, so that had a slightly different color palette than gray and green. There was a twinge of orange. Some sections I take a bunch of footage and think, I'll come up with something to say later, and then there really isn't anything to say. Oh, all the North New England states had different moose signs, so that was a fun thing to spot. I didn't spot any moose, though. The fog is coming, 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 the fog is coming. This was pretty much the last couple hours of my drive. The fog started to become orange due to the sunset, at least I can only assume. After crossing basically all of Maine from west to east, I arrived at Lubeck, the easternmost town in the 50 states, and where I would be staying for the night. I could really see why there are so many horror stories set in Maine.
Long room.
So I settled into my strangely long room, ready to finally reach my first extreme point of the trip, which you'll see next time on The Big Loop 2.
I'm in.
Mississippi.
I've set foot in Pennsylvania. Back there.
Iowa.
My naked.
Thanks for watching part 2 of The Big Loop 2. I'd really appreciate if you liked and subscribe, plus subscribing helps make sure you don't miss any of the parts, and there's 5 more to go. Also check out the other social medias I have in the description below. I'm going to be posting some Big Loop related stuff on those, so check that out. It was really nice seeing all the positive feedback from the first part. You know, it's kind of a project I was kind of nervous to release and was kind of pushing back both consciously and unconsciously. And so, you know, it was really nice seeing that people enjoyed it, and so I hope people enjoyed this part too. I'm a little more nervous to release this part, honestly, since it's a bit more negative, but, you know, once again, thanks for watching, and to the 13% of you who are still here, yeah.